Let's repair a rotten window. You can visibly see damage, and also you can feel for damage with your finger or a sharp object like a knife. It's a little bit like an apple. An apple has a soft patch in it, like a rotten piece in it, you'll be able to put your finger right through it. And it's exactly the same with timber. First step is identify whether it needs a patch, like say just this area, or is it more cost effective, time effective to just replace the whole piece of timber. In this situation, I'm going to replace the whole piece of timber. This piece here where my finger is, I'm going to use a resin. Specific tools that I'll need is some epoxy, so these will just fill up the gaps. It's a bit like a tooth filling. I'm going to drill out all the rot, and then I'm going to put a filling in there, and then a multi-tool. And then we need a saw. You know, a saw's like a basic tool for a carpenter. This is the piece of timber we're going to use. I've got to cut it to size with my table saw, but that's going to fit on there. And then just put a patch in this area. So yeah, first thing we're going to do is cut the paint where the seams are. The reason why you do this is if I rip this piece off, it's going to rip that piece of paint off beside it. So we just cut it here, so when this detaches, when I pull it off, it doesn't rip this piece off. A lot of people call this like demo or demolition work, but really it's deconstruction work. So when you deconstruct something, take it apart piece by piece. You don't just get your sledgehammer out and just start smashing shit up. You know, you pull it off nicely and create the least amount of rubbish as possible. Always be tidy. Oh, the framing's actually quite solid underneath, which is like awesome. It's got a thing called borer in it. The bug goes in there and then it flies out of the hole. So every hole you see is where a bug has flown out of a hole. When you're doing demo, you're going to have a lot of timber that has nails sticking up. So you're liable, if you don't see it, to stand on one. So what I do is, like say if it's sticking up like that, then I just bend it over with my hammer. And the reason why I don't use that end is because it's quicker just to hit it with that side, because you're less likely to miss the nail when you use this face. So I just slap it like that, slap it down. I don't go like this. Doink, each nail. I'm a guy that loves to wear earplugs, and I like to keep them in my sock, because if they're in my pocket and I've got something else in my pocket, like a whole lot of sawdust, then my earplugs are going to get all dusty. Sometimes I wear earplugs and earmuffs on top if I'm using a chainsaw, or if there's someone on site who's talking a lot of shit, then I'll make sure I'm wearing my earplugs and my earmuffs so I don't hear them while I'm working. The framing on this house is awesome actually, and I think that's attributed to the big eaves on this house. So when there's a big eave, the cladding doesn't get as much of a hiding. So you see a lot of modern houses these days, they have zero eaves. I mean, they look sick, they look awesome, but you really need that. You really need the eaves to protect the cladding. So how this was set up before was the timber went down like this. When I set this up again, I'm going to have the timber sticking out and then lapping over this edge. So the water's going to run down here and then go down there. So when I scrape the paint off, it reveals the dark parts. The dark parts are quite soft and wet, so I actually need to go further back with this. This is Remu. Just double check that that it's hard. Yeah, it's a hard timber there. And then I'm going to draw a line. So the rot's here, so I'm going to cut it here with my multi-tool. That's about 100 mil away from the rotten point. The reason why I'm using my square is because I want to like use it to make sure that my plunge is nice and square. I just realised there's a sill flashing underneath here, a steel sill flashing, and I've been trying to cut it with my multi-tool. Yeah, so don't do that. So for some external joinery, there's going to be never-ending softness in the timber, and you can buy timber hardeners for that. It's like a syrup that you put on it, and then it dries and it makes the timber hard, and then you can resin over the top of that. This nail here is sticking out through here where I want to put my timber patch. So a good trick to use is I put my dog bar in like that, I get my hammer like this, and then it just pulls the nail straight out, just like that, and then straight into the bucket. I'm going to build a little piece that's this shape. It's going to take a bit of thought and patience. So I'm measuring the distance from here to here. So when I actually fit my piece in here, I'm going to make it 5 mil. A 5 mil gap here and a 5 mil gap here. The reason why I'm going to do that is because the resin needs to be able to flex, and if there's not enough space between each part, then the resin can't flex properly and you'll get cracking. I mean, the resin looks hard, but it needs to be a little bit flexible as well because the whole house is moving all the time. So you know when you've done a great job is when it's dry to the touch. Everywhere you put your fingers, it's all dry. And also you can tell that it's dry because it's a light colour. Now it's time to cut my timber to put in here, and then my resin will go in the gaps of the timber. I'm working out the correct angle for the piece that I'm going to put in here, and I'm going to use my bevel to get that angle just right there. So I've hand picked this piece of timber, and it's a nice straight piece of timber. It's dry, and so you can tell that it's straight when you look along it. So whenever I'm doing like a finishing job, I'm going to try and pick the clearest piece of the timber, which means there's no knot in the area that I'm going to use. So you see there's a knot here, I'm just going to mark it on this side of the knot like that, and then I'm going to cut this end. So I've measured this here, 487, then I'm going to cut my piece. So I'm going to copy this angle with my bevel, and then I'm going to transfer that onto my timber. So that this angle, whatever that angle is there, is the same as this angle. So I'm trying to match this timber with this timber here. I want to shape it and make it look like it was original. So I get my bevel and then I tighten it up. So to get this angle, I use my bevel. I put my bevel up against my set square, and then it shows me 27 degrees. So that's what I set my table saw to. This machine it's really easy to lose your fingers on this machine. Where you see retards go wrong on this is they try and put their fingers too close to the blade. You need to use your push stick, and as a general rule, I like to keep my fingers 90 mil away from any blade. I'm making sure that my table saw is solid on the ground as well. So you can take all the safety precautions that you can, and you can still lose your fingers. That's actually a really great angle. So now I've matched this angle with this angle, so this face and this face is on the same plane as this face and this face. So now all I need to do is I need to cut the back. So I'm going to line up this face here with this face with my ruler, and then I'm going to scribe it here, and I'm going to cut along here, and a cut that goes down the length of the grain is called a rip cut, and then across the grain is a cross cut. This piece doesn't have to be perfect because I'm going to put resin around the joins anyway, but if it was a tight fit, then this I'd have to be working to less than 1 mil tolerance. Why tolerance is important in building is because different things need tolerance. Framing, you can get away with 5 mil. With finishing, anything you see, you can't really get away with a 5 mil tolerance. It needs to be less than 1 millimeter or less than 0.5 millimeter. Being a good carpenter is about understanding what the tolerances are of each task. Better to cut not enough off than too much. Oh! Did you see it jump up a bit there?
Yep.
Yeah, you don't want that to happen. Like I was worried for a bit there. That's close enough, and then we'll just resin the gaps. The resin needs a gap in it anyway, as I was saying. So there's a weather groove in here, and I'm going to put a weather groove in my piece as well to match that. So I'll just get my ruler, measure the distance of the weather groove. It's 10 mil. Having a weather groove is good practice. So I've linked up these two grooves here. The water will drip off this drip edge. It won't go, the water won't travel up and then into the joinery. Put the repair care primer on. So we're going to apply it and then let it sit for 20 minutes. Ratios are quite important in building, whether it's mixing concrete or mixing this resin. Oh, putting the primer on it, the epoxy primer on both faces, the patch piece and the window. Drill a hole here and here, and that's what I'm going to use to hold my piece on while my epoxy dries. So I'm going to line up this edge with this edge here. So I'm lining up this edge with this timber. It's just touching here, and I want to have a 5 to 10 mil gap here. Now there's a gap in there to put my resin. We've put in our sill, and now I'm going to fill this gap with timber. So I'm just going to mark it here, and I'm going to cut this little piece off. So basically we're going to fill as much as we can with timber, and the rest is going to get filled with resin. Sweet. So I'll remove the screws once the epoxy has dried, because I don't want anything rigid holding this on. I want this piece to be floating but have a little bit of rigidity as well, if that makes sense. The screws are just to hold it while the resin goes off. Okay, now it's time for the big resin. The resin we're here. I'm just going to squeeze it out. Oh, g'day. Chuck this little batch in first. So I've mixed it up. It's turned kind of like a creamy colour, and now I'm going to stick it in the window. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to use as much epoxy as possible so I don't have to bog it later. If I use bog, then it's liable to crack, because bog is so hard, and any movement the bog will crack. So I'm going to lay this out thicker than I need it here, and then I'm going to sand it off later. It's actually starting to look pretty good now. So I've put on my epoxy resin and I'll leave it to dry overnight. And in the meantime, I'm going to weatherproof this join by sticking this timber back on. So I'm putting a plastic bag over it so that water doesn't go inside into the framing. So I'm seeing this today and I've noticed it's like really strong. I've tested it for strength, so I'm putting maybe like 40 kg on it and it's not even moving, so solid. Yeah, that's good angle on there, yep. So I'm going to trim this corner. I'm going to take off as much as I can and then I'm going to sand it, because the sander takes forever to remove material, so yep. The faster you can remove the material, the sooner the job can get done. Yeah, now I'll just sand it a bit. Oh, yeah. That actually looks pretty good. I'm surprised. So this corner's come out great. Like that there. 1242 will make it just a hair longer, because you can always go shorter but you can't go longer unless you've got a board extender. And I didn't bring my board extender today. And also this flashing could be sticking up as well. The flashing might not be perfectly horizontal. 1237, so that's 5mm difference. So with the old houses, things can be not square, not plumb, not vertical, not straight. So in this situation here, I haven't assumed that when I cut my piece it'll be 1242 on this side and 1242 on this side. It's actually going to be a little flashing. Yeah, up to the flashing. So I've measured it and it's actually got a little bit of an angle on it. So I'm not going to cut this corner square. So I'm going to do a bit of custom cutting. It's great to have measuring tools, but sometimes you've just got to use your materials and make a mark on it. Yeah, all you need is a pencil. Put your material up here, make your mark, and then I'll measure the distance from here to here, and that is 176. I'm really taking my time on this because I don't want to go back to Bunnings to get a new piece, and timber costs money. Timber's expensive. So see how there's a gap here? We're going to scribe it using a packer, and that gives me a line that's parallel with this face here. So I'll just go and cut that, and then I'll refit it like that. So I'm going to put this on temporarily, and then I'm going to see how it matches up to the other side. So I'm just going to mark where my fixing is, because when I put my board up I can't see it. I'm marking the other side because then I can then I'll know where to cut it. Oh, yeah. So I'm just going to cut it there. So I've marked my top, and now I'm using the scrap piece to mark the bottom. So I'm just going to mark it right there, and then I'm going to compare these two marks, and you can see that it needs to be a little bit more narrower at the bottom than it is at the top. So I've measured from the bottom of the flashing down to this point, and it's 1233. Now I'm going to make it flush with my ruler. When fitting the side panels and you've got an angled sill, you need to understand the short point and the long point of the trim you're trying to fit, because buildings have angles that are not all 90 degrees. Hot tip, cutting on the correct side of the line. So I've measured where my piece needs to go, and it's 1238. So you've got to consider the thickness of the kerf of the blade. So the kerf of the blade's 3mm. So if I cut on this line, I'm going to get a piece that's 1238. If I cut on the wrong side of the line, which is this side of the line, then I'm going to get 1235. So I've made a custom punch. The reason why I like this punch is because it doesn't make the hole bigger as it goes in. It's not tapered. So that's punching it with the custom punch. So that's the size of the hole. And then this is with a standard punch. It makes the hole twice as big. Here's a hot tip for you. Put this timber in behind here so that the bar doesn't mar the wood. It doesn't dent the timber. So you'd rather put the dent on this rubbish than put the dent on the window. So we're using an oil-based primer because it lasts longer than water-based. And now to pull this off, I don't have to punch the nails through to pull it off. I can just pull it off by hand probably. Now that I'm happy with how this box corner fits, I'm going to take it off and I'm going to shoot this corner so that this corner doesn't separate over time. Mark these two pieces here with a line so that when I pull it off, I know exactly where they join. I'm marking these two faces so that I don't forget which face to put the glue on. This is going to watertight the join. So I'm going to shoot this end first. I'm going to check that my reference lines are lining up, and I'm also going to check that this face here is nice and flush. And then I'm going to shoot it. I'll show you what you don't want. You don't want to hold your gun like this and then the nail sticks out the end like that. I'm loving how the silicone is spudging out here. That means I know that it's getting really good contact and the water won't be able to get in. When I clamp this up, it's going to push the silicone out, which is what I want. I'm going to put the most nails in the bottom because I don't want it to separate at the bottom. It's most likely to separate at the bottom. Wipe the excess off. I'm pulling these screws out because I want to maintain the flexibility in the resin. These screws were just to hold the timber while the resin sets. Sand and plane the repair at the same time. I'm just joking. Use one tool at a time. So I line up my straight edge with my windowsill, rock it back and forth. When I rock it back and forth, that means that it's not straight yet. So I need to take a bit more off. See, now it's not rocking, it's straight with the straight edge. The reason why I smooth it is because when I paint it, it's not going to have humps in it. Line this edge of the sill up. So I'm just going to mark it like this so that it all looks nice. Beautiful. Come check this out, look nice and close. There's a channel going on along here and there's resin in its way, so I'm going to remove this resin using my multi-tool and a sander. I'm sanding it here to make it smooth. This piece of tape up here is to protect the window from getting scratched. See how my blade's all dirty, but there's a sharp piece at the end here that's clean? I'm going to use that, so I'm just going to break this off with the claw of my hammer. Easy as that. I'm cutting off the excess. Once you paint it, you can really see where the imperfections are, and then you can sand it again if you want to. I'm going to paint this with an oil-based primer. If you're going to make love, wear a glove. Oil-based primer. So I'm just going to paint behind the box. It's just an extra precaution. I'm painting this section for extra protection. So I'm going to start at the top. So you've got to really push this in. It's really easy to not push it hard enough, and then you put all the nails in and you realise that the corner's on the piss. So I'm just going to stand back and double check that this looks right. Yep, now we can shoot the bottom. I'm going to use contract filler to fill all the little holes. I'm sanding the contract filler with 80 grit sandpaper. Bit of light sanding. Nice and smooth. I'm pre-drilling so that it doesn't crack the timber. The stainless steel screws fixes the box to the framing. Stainless steel screws are great. They won't rust, but they break easily, so you got to be careful when you put them in. If I ever meet the guy who invented bog, I'm going to shake his hand. I'm the bog king. Primer is used so that the top coats can stick to the timber. This primer is going on really badly because I've just realised that I'm putting primer on top of primer and I should be putting top coat on there. The job's done. It's all primed and I'm happy with it. It's a good fix, it's solid, it's not going anywhere. I've taken the rod out. So thanks for watching the video, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Yeah, cheers for watching.